Hey everybody, how's your day going? I hope you've had a great week so far. I'm making the Tuesday video today, which is Thursday, so it probably won't get uploaded until tomorrow, which is Friday. But I just was not able to get all my research and everything done that I wanted to do in time, and I was just slacking in general. But I want to thank everybody that watched the previous videos that I've posted. I really appreciate the support on my channel. And I also, if you like this video, would appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up, leave me some comments so we can interact with each other. And if you have any suggestions about new content to put out, feel free to do that as well. I would appreciate it. The story we're going to talk about today is the story of Robert Bashara, aka the Dungeon Master. So this story is pretty intriguing. It has kind of everything. I guess the typical things that most murderers have. But so I just want to give a little viewer discretion. Viewer discretion is advised. This video contains adult language, adult situations, and adult content. That is all. Anyway, so I'm gonna fix my hair. We'll talk about, this story and get to know Robert a little bit better. So Robert Bashara is known around town where they live in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, as kind of like the it man in town. He's known as Big Bob Bashara, and people just call him, Big Bob. He is the son of George Bashara, who was a state appellate court judge, and Bob himself was a member of the Board of Governors at Wayne State University, and then he also was the president of the Grosse Pointe Rotary Club. Side note, I have no plan on what I'm doing with my hair today. I'm just gonna give it a go. I didn't plan this out very well. So I totally was starting to do my hair, and then I realized that I didn't even use the products that I brought to use. So I just want to introduce you guys to one by Dry Bar. It's called Pep Rally, and it is a prime and prep detangler. And my hair, can you see it? I guess the lighting is kind of not that great. Anyway, so my hair gets really, really tangled. It's a nightmare to brush through. I use this stuff and it makes it so much easier, and it actually seems to dry a little faster, which is awesome. And then I'm also gonna use the Lane's Revival Heat Shield to protect my hair. So, oh, wow. I'm gonna go ahead and spray that on here right now, since I started, and I shouldn't have without using my product and all. I'm just gonna brush it in and separate my hair. But anyway, before I go any further, I just want to say that there are pretty much 5 main people in this case that really play a big role. And Bob, of course, is number 1. The next person is his wife, Jane. So Jane is his wife, and she is a senior marketing manager for a company named Kema, K-E-M-A, services. And pretty much that's like an energy consulting and testing company in Detroit. And she's also, of course, the mother of 2 and a wife. She's an active church, or was an active church member as well. She was very involved in the Rotary Club, and she served as the Mothers Club president at her children's high school in Grosse Pointe South, at Grosse Pointe South High School. Lord have mercy, I can't talk. Anyway, and then the next person that comes into play is a guy named Steve Tabato. Now, Steve Tabato owns a local furniture store, and I'm not really sure how he and Bob met. I don't know if they bought furniture or just, met through one of the different clubs that they were involved in the community or what. But everybody knows Bob and Jane as being super active in the community, well known, well liked, and respected, highly regarded. But to Steve, so he owns, like I said, this local furniture store. And one day Bob comes to Steve and he asks him, he tells him that he's got some work that he needs done on a couple of his properties. And does he have anybody that he could suggest to him to do these little odds and ends jobs? Not like a full-time position or anything like that, just random things that he needed to be done and didn't want to do them himself, or didn't know how to. So Steve pretty much recommends this guy named Joe Kentz, and Joe Kentz is quite a character. He I almost kind of feel sorry for him because I think he had a lot going on and a lot of things that were untreated. So, but Joe Kent's, he's the 6'7", you know, big, like linebacker looking guy. I mean, you would probably look at him and maybe scared just based on his height alone. So, pretty much refused to take any medication for any of his diagnoses as far as I think anything went, mental or otherwise. I don't know, mental health is so important, and I know it's, you know, so frowned upon, or used to be really frowned upon, but it's so important to take care of yourself mental health wise, because it's like if you have a headache, most people take headache medicine. It's no different, you know, it has a stigma around it, but it's really no different. You want to get better, you want to take the medicine, you want to give yourself every effort to be as, I don't believe in normal, but you want to give yourself every effort to be as normal as possible. So anyway, unfortunately, you know, Joe just, I don't know if he didn't feel it was necessary to take medicine, he didn't believe in medicine, or if he didn't believe something was wrong with him. I'm not really sure, but I also don't think he maybe had the ability to make those decisions for himself, just given the fact that he was, you know, there on the border of mental retardation, but maybe he was, I don't know. Anyway, and then the last key player, component person in this story is a lady named Rachel Gillette. And I don't want to give away the whole story, but just to give you an idea, she and Bob, first of all, she was one of Bob's mistresses, and of course that just gives everything away, right? But anyway, she was also a submissive to Bob. She was one of his subs. And of course that relates to the whole BDSM. If you don't know what that is, Google it. Unless you're not old enough to Google it, and then don't Google it. But anyway, so she and Bob were, she worked at Wayne State University. I'm not sure what her role was there, but she and Bob obviously were having this affair, and maybe they met. I don't really know how they met. She says in court that they met online, and that she was looking for a master in an adult forum, and that's how she came across Bob. So apparently she and Bob have been having an affair, and you can guess one thing leads to another as far as that goes. Well, the whole story here is not about her. It's about Jane and Bob. So Bob and Jane, they married in 1985. So at that time, in January, they had been married, in 2012 rather, they had been married 26 years, and they lived in an affluent neighborhood, Grosse Pointe Park. And I mean, it's just beautiful, beautiful homes, beautiful scenery, just a nice place to live, low crime rate. Just nothing really bad ever seems to happen in that particular area. And these two seem to have it all. I mean, Bob has, you know, this thriving career where he kind of is half self-employed and half working for somebody else. And then his wife is pretty much an executive of a utility company, and they live in this beautiful home. They have two beautiful, healthy children, and they are very well known in the community. They're very involved in the community, be it church, the country club, or whatever. They're just out there living it up, having a good time. And they're often photographed together doing the things that they love, like golfing or going out to eat or being part of fundraisers, because Bob was a little bit of a wannabe philanthropist. They probably as a couple did donate money, but I think he tried to make it seem like he had a whole lot more money personally than what he did. And he probably tended to give away money or donate to causes in an effort to look better, to make himself look good, and not because his heart was truly in it. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think if you're gonna donate. I don't know, personally, I want my heart to be in it. Anyway, so like I said, the two really seem to have it all. Thriving careers, they're cheerful with other people, they have mutual love and respect for one another, and you know, lots of involvement in the community and church. Now we're at January 24th, 2012. And again, this couple rather, has been married 26 years. So Bob probably knows, you know, what his wife's day looks like, what her normal routine is, yada yada. You get the drift. So January 24th, 2012, Bob Bashara calls the local police department and notifies them that his wife, Jane, has not come home, and that he's been expecting her because they were supposed to work on like their income taxes or something like that. And he's not seeing her, she's not answering the phone. And so he starts, you know, the police are like, well, it's too early to do a missing person. She's not even been gone 24 hours, but he wanted to go ahead and let him know. He's like, fine. So he calls friends and family, you know, asking, have you guys seen Jane? Has she been to your house? Have you talked to her on the phone? Where's Jane? And of course, they're all like, no, we haven't talked to her since, you know, maybe earlier in the day or something. And they're all kind of like, not that worried about it. I'm sure she'll be fine. But as the evening progresses, Jane doesn't show up, and still no one's able to get her on the phone. Well, the next day, January 25th, 2012, at 7 a.m., Jane's black Mercedes SUV is found on a back alley in the east side of Detroit. And from what I understand, that's kind of like not the place you want to be. There's a lot of crime that goes on there. You're more likely to see somebody overdosing from heroin, because at that time, heroin was really predominant and getting a strong hold on people. And I think a lot of people didn't know of the dangers of heroin. So anyway, her SUV's found, and a tow truck is actually what found it, but they're not allowed to tow unless the police are there. So the tow truck drives around and does some other stuff. And then when the police get there, the tow truck driver comes back, and they notice that Jane is in the car. The car's unlocked. They open it up. There's Jane. She's in the back seat of her SUV, and pretty much she's like leaned over. She's on her knees, kind of kneeling over the back of the SUV, and her head's twisted in this funky way, and one of her arms is kind of up. It doesn't look good. So they open, the front door, and in the floorboard of the front passenger seat is her purse, and in the seat is a pill bottle, and in the floorboard is her purse, and they're like the contents of her purse are kind of just strewn about. But they notice that, one, the medication's still there, but none of her money or credit cards or anything's been taken. Like her car keys were still in there. Like somebody totally could have just robbed the dang car and chopped it and kept it moving, or threw the body out or whatever. But lucky for police and Bob, she was found, as was her car. So that's strange that, she looked like this, but they couldn't see, there was no mention of blood, and in the photographs that I saw, there was no blood. So it looked like maybe she had been strangled or something. So that night, because remember, this happened at 7 a.m., they find her body. So that night, the evening of the 25th of January, a candlelight vigil was held for Jane. And, obviously everybody in the town's talking about it because it's a small town. Well, the community might be a small community. I don't know that it's a small town, but everybody knew them. I mean, they're a well-known couple, almost like a power couple, right? So it was held, the candlelight vigil was held at their kids' high school, which was the Grosse Pointe South High School. And the couple's minister led a prayer at the gathering, but Bob, he didn't speak. He attended, but he didn't speak at all. So Bob, he does attend the vigil, but he does not speak. And I don't know if it was because he was grief-stricken, he just didn't have the words, what's going on there. Yeah, right. But he just doesn't speak. And February 1st, now this is a very tight timeline. You got January 25th, they find the body, they hold a candlelight vigil. Well, on February 1st, a man walks into the Grosse Pointe Police Department, and he's got something to say. He wants to speak to a detective, and he confesses to the murder of Jane Bashara. And who is that man, you might ask? Was it Steve? Was it Bob? Was it Joe? Yeah, if you guessed Joe, you're right. So Joe walks in and he confesses to this murder, but guess what? The police don't believe him. Not only do they not believe him, but they also didn't read him his Miranda rights. So, you know, what are they to do? So you gotta think back to Joe's mental state and the fact that he, you know, people, I guess, knew that he wasn't, that he did have some mental defects, and he wasn't, I don't want to say 100% there, but he just, the low IQ and things like that come into play here. So they just thought he didn't really understand what he was confessing to, and that he didn't really know what he was talking about, and they really just kind of dismissed, what Joe said. And Joe, you know, was let go, and he's really, you know, he just walks out of the police department, but he's really frustrated because nobody is listening to what he's saying. So Joe decides to go to a local news reporter and tell him that, you know, hey, I went up to the police department, I tried to confess, and tells the reporter, you know, Bob just, he kept saying that he's got a deadline, he has a deadline. And the reporter, you know, police sometimes leak information to reporters. Surprise, surprise, right? But the reporter knew that there was actually some validity to what Joe was saying. So the reporter calls up the detectives and says, listen, man, you know, I really think you need to listen to what Joe's saying. He knows more than any person who was not involved with the murder should know. So once again, Joe goes back to the police station and asks to speak to the detectives, you know, assigned to Jane's case. And I guess they are hearing him now. They're really listening to him because of, you know, the reporter having recommending that they listen. So anyway, Joe sits down with detectives, and he, you know, pretty much busts the case wide open, because up to this point they didn't have a murder scene. They didn't know really, they thought she was strangled. They didn't have any of the basic questions, who, what, when, where, why. And here comes Joe busting the case wide open. So anywho, Joe tells them this time, he claims that many times Bob has tried to hire him to murder his wife, and that he's offered him $8,000 and a Cadillac for the murder of his wife. And he keeps telling him, you know, I got this deadline, I need you to make this happen, and just keeps on and keeps on and keeps on. But Joe's like, no way, I'm not doing that, I'm not interested, several times over. And he continues to do work for him, but Bob continues to ask him to murder his wife. Bob hires Joe to do another job, and this time it is to like do some cleaning and do some things in Bob and Jane's garage. So he comes over and he's there working in the garage, and Bob's like, listen, he comes in, you know, he's got a gun in his hand. He's like, listen, it's now or never. His wife is on the way home and I need you to do it. I've got this deadline. I've got to get this done. I'm running out of time. And Joe's like, no. And as Jane, you know, gets closer and closer, Bob starts yelling at Joe, telling him, you know, if you don't kill her, I'm going to kill you and her. So, of course, Joe's a little fearful for his own life. So as soon as Jane pulls in and is starting to get out of the car, he hits her on the head shoulder area, and Bob yells at him to, you know, make sure the job is done. And at that point, Joe, she's down on the ground, Jane is. Joe proceeds to stomp on her neck, and he could audibly hear it break. So her neck is broken, and Bob's like, now get rid of the body, which is just crazy. So Joe loads up Jane's body into the backseat of her SUV, drives it to an alleyway, you know, there on the east side, and leaves the SUV. And Joe, before they leave, Bob takes Jane's purse and kind of just throws the stuff about in the front seat there, trying to make it kind of look like an attempted robbery or something like that. So that, I don't know. Anyway, it is what it is. Again, this time Joe's held for 72 hours, but they didn't read him his Miranda rights. And I'm not sure that was the case in the first go around, like I said earlier, but in this particular one, he definitely was not read his Miranda rights, and he had agreed to like a plea bargain or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so they don't hold him. Joe's not charged. He's just confessed to this murder again, and he's not, he's not charged. So he walks out, and he's super upset. Not that he's not being held, but he just still feels like he's not being taken seriously. So there is, it's been reported, that this Joe guy's arrested, and for his protection, they're not using his last name, but a reporter does see him coming out, and he does an interview with Joe, and Joe says, quote, he wants justice. And he's talking about, for Jane, for himself, and for Bob to be held accountable. So when this happens, it comes out that this was this murder for hire plot that Bob solicited. And here's poor old Joe, who doesn't really have, I think, the mental capacity to really know what he's engaging in or might be engaging in. So whatever, it is what it is. That prompts Bob to go to the media himself. He's gonna clear this up. So he goes on camera several different times, but one of which is with his mom and his daughter. And he tries to clear it up. He pleads his innocence and that he didn't have anything to do with his wife. And he was quoted on February 4th as saying, and this is again 3 days after the original confession from Joe, he stated that, quote, I did not kill my wife. I had nothing to do with this. And he also says that because Joe is out, he fears for his life and he worries of his kids and their safety, because this man, who he has no idea why would want to kill his wife, maybe it was because he owed him money and he was mad about the money, just a bunch of malarkey. Media that Bob does is on February 4th. Let's back it up to February 2nd. So on February 2nd of this same year, there are several publications reporting that Bob, Bashara, leads a double life. He allegedly had this whole double life, and it was centered around sadomasochism or BDSM and the sexual deviancy with the women in his life. So he had these mistresses and these submissives, which, are subs in a master-sub relationship. So it's reported that he had a sex dungeon in what was supposed to be his office, which is the basement pub area of the pub that he owned. It's down in the basement. So the sex dungeon is at the bottom of the Hard Luck Lounge, or was. It's been demolished, the whole building has. But anyway, and there were just a little bit of everything. There were mirrors hung on the wall, and that were angled mirrors on the wall that were angled toward the bed. There were whips and chains and different places to chain people up, chain people to the bed, chain people to the wall. You get it. Several BDSM style torture devices. And again, this is supposed to be where Bob's office is, that he goes down to do some of his work. I don't know what kind of work he was doing, but hey, if you can get paid to do it, more power to you. Anyway, so yeah. So through this discovery, the discovery of Bob's sex dungeon, we learn more about Master Bob, and that's what his subs refer to him as. Turns out that Big Bob has a big problem. He has erectile dysfunction, and normally that's not a big deal. There's medications that can be used for that. There's different surgeries and things that you can use to enhance, but there's also, you know, toys and stuff like that, neither here nor there. But anyway, the point here is he had erectile dysfunction, and maybe, you know, because he was unable to achieve erection, he might have, you know, felt like emasculated, less of a man, or whatever. And maybe this Master Bob, it gave him the feeling, you know, of being able to be in control of women, and for them to kind of look up to him and, I don't want to say admire, but just like swoon after him or desire him. I don't know. Anyway, no, not for me. But anyway, so he liked to inflict pain on women, and, you know, like I said, Rachel found him there, and she was looking for somebody to inflict the pain. Yeah. So this Master Bob was pretty much a kinky sex persona, and he hid it. He hid it from his family. He hid it from his, you know, I don't know, maybe not all of his friends, but like the people that he felt like should know, like the people at his country club, or people that were on boards with him, or more highfalutin or something like that. I don't know, but he hid it, okay? And again, this man, his image all this time had been one of more of a philanthropist, and now it's some more of a philanderer. And it looks like he's killed his wife, the mother of his kids. You know, this is a pretty secret life. So yeah, he had sex dungeons. I think he had more than one. He had multiple sex partners. He was doing cocaine at the country club. Like, all of this stuff comes out to light, and it ends up, you know, he ends up putting a hit out on a man, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But it's like every week something new was coming out about good old Bob, and he's not as straight-laced as people thought he was. His money situation really was not what people thought it was. Surprise, surprise, nobody's ever is. So also in the same month of February, multiple media sources are reporting that Bob, one of his relationships with one of his alleged mistresses, a lady named Rachel Gillette, and she's one of the key players that I mentioned earlier. She was employed at the alumni office at Wayne State University. She was fired after she left the office the day that her body was discovered. So she's fired because she left that day. Why'd she leave that day? Must have weighed pretty heavy on her mind. I don't know why she didn't, I don't know what happened there. I don't know why they would fire her just for leaving for that day. I don't know how all that works. It's not my business, but just seems a little suspicious that she was also fired that same day. What did you do? Just walk out on your job? Or did you think that Bob and this master plan that both of you had was gonna work out, and now you're gonna be living all hunky-dory on Bob's dime, which is actually not even his dime, sad to say. Anyway, so the police actually ended up doing an investigation, or serving a search warrant at Gillette's home, which is Rachel. They did that in March. And police stated, that Rachel wasn't really a person of interest, but they just wanted to check out her house. They ended up leaving there with like seven boxes and a couple of evidence bags, and they obviously interviewed Rachel too. So Bob, think about this. His wife's missing, his wife's body's found. A couple days later, Joe goes in and confesses that he's done this, and is kind of throwing it back on Bob, like Bob was trying to hire him to do this. So what does Joe do besides doing the media, trying to spin a better light on himself? Well, Bob decides he's going to take matters into his own hand. At the time, Joe was not, they needed to decide whether or not Joe was competent enough to stand trial. And without knowing this, they had to give it some time and let some different professionals come in and see that he was capable of standing trial. So Bob goes to Steve. Steve is the guy that, referred him to Joe in the first place. So he goes to Steve and he's like, wanting to see if he has any connections to anybody in the jail that Joe is currently behind bars at. So obviously in this, Joe has gotten arrested, and they finally got it right, and they arrest him. He's agreed to a plea deal. And during this time, that's when they're trying to find if Joe is competent enough to stand trial. Well, Bob realizes that if Joe is found competent, he will be able to testify against him in his wife's murder trial. So he asks the Steve guy, do you know of anybody that could, kill him in jail? And one might think that Bob wanted to have Joe killed because this is the man that killed your wife. Like, regardless of if he was blaming it on Joe or not, on Bob or not, he was still the guy that killed his wife. Like, maybe it was a vengeance killing. But no, he tells Steve he wants him killed in jail so that he can't be found competent, so that he doesn't have to lose his own life, because his life's on the line. Forget my wife, forget anybody else, what about me, right? Goes to Steve and is looking to find somebody to kill Joe while he's in jail, because if he's found competent to stand trial, he can testify against Bob, and possibly Bob would be facing charges should this happen. So he's kind of in a real time crunch there too, making sure that old Joe can't testify against him. When Steve and Bob get together and have this conversation, Steve decides he's going to go to the police. He goes to the police, and police ask him if he'll wear a wire. He agrees. So Steve's wearing a wire. They meet up again. Steve tells Bob, look, it's going to be $20,000. You got to pay $2,000 down. We can make this happen. And he gives a couple of different ways that they can make this happen, and how to look like an accident, and just random different stuff. And you can audibly hear Bob counting out the money, like 1, 2, 3, you know what I mean? Which it just amazes me. And he even asked Steve several times, are you wearing a wire? Are you trying to set me up? And at one point, Steve pretty much just drops his pants to be like, no, I'm not wearing a wire. That's against me. I'm Sicilian. I wouldn't do that. Yada, yada, whatever. Lies, 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 lies and deceit. Anyway, so yeah. When this happens, of course, Bob's arrested for attempting to hire somebody to murder Joe. And, while he's in jail, he's also charged with first-degree premeditated murder of his wife, Jane. Bob, he actually pleads guilty to the murder for hire charge and is sentenced to, I think, like 6 years or something for that. But he states, yes, I did this, and I did this because this man killed my wife. Bullcrap, obviously. But it wasn't because of that, he's trying to say, you know, it didn't have anything to do with him having anything to do with his wife's murder. It was just purely that man killed his wife. Obviously, he says otherwise on the recording, on the wire recording that Steve was wearing. But anyway, it doesn't matter. He did it, right? He did it. And he admitted to it. So he's sentenced, and needless to say, when they go to court, they bring in, I don't even know, a lot of evidence, circumstantial evidence probably, but they bring in also some of his mistresses, of course his main mistress, which was Rachel. And Rachel explains how they met and that she's one of his subs. Rachel and Bob had these plans to, you know, for him to be this master and house himself and his mistresses and fund this BDSM lifestyle, and things were just gonna be gravy because, mind you, Rachel and Bob, the same week that Jane is murdered, are also supposed to be closing on a house together, like literally in that same week. So that timeline and that deadline that Bob is referring to is the fact that Rachel gave him an ultimatum. He had lied to her before, saying that, you know, first he wasn't married, he was divorced. Then he was married, but they're just waiting on the kids to whatever. And then it was, I'm gonna leave my wife. And anyway, they end up buying a house together, and the closing is the same week that his wife ends up dead. So do you think there's any connection there? Probably so. It's just crazy. But he is convicted of first-degree murder of his wife, and he's sentenced to life in prison. On August the 20th, or excuse me, in August 2020, he died at the age of 62. I didn't see what he died of. I wasn't able to find that information, but he did die. You know, sad, whatever. Anyway, Joe was convicted of second degree murder, and he was sentenced to 17 to 28 years in a Michigan prison, and I believe he is eligible for parole in 2029. It's coming up. But the why, the biggest thing in this story is the why. I mean, I don't feel like there's ever a good reason to plot to kill. Really, I don't think there's ever like a good reason to kill anybody. Murder. I mean, maybe to protect yourself, like for real, but other than that, not really a good reason in my opinion. So the why is the biggest question of them all. Everybody always wants to know why. It's like, why would you do this? Why would you not just get a divorce? Several theories are out there, one of which is like, well, his business was actually not successful, and his wife was the actual one that really made the money. And without her money to fund this lifestyle, this lavish lifestyle that he had been living, then it would be like a division of assets, and it wouldn't be as great, grand, as wonderful. People would know, even with half her money, let's just say he was able to get half in a divorce, he wouldn't be able to continue on with the lifestyle that he had been leading, because there wouldn't be the steady influx of income, because she was the breadwinner in their relationship. So without her, it would be impossible. But with her, it was also impossible, because it's like, are you gonna let your husband go in this house, go live with these other women, and also continue to support and fund him, or you know, whatever? I don't know. Anyway, so like I said, several theories, but the most rumored one is that you know, Bob was running out of time because of him and his mistress's, Rachel's house closing. That deadline was coming. Every day was like a ticking time bomb. Like, oh my gosh, we gotta go close and sign on this house. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And Bob's business is failing. Jane actually had $800,000 in a retirement account. And she also had, you know, life insurance, and he could use all this money, like I said, to fund his BDSM lifestyle, to create sex dungeons, and have the space for his subs to live. I don't know. What do you think? Could have been anything. People don't even really have to have a reason to murder. Sometimes they just do. Not that it's a good thing. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I appreciate you so much for tuning in. Like, oh my gosh, I appreciate so much. Question, if I was to talk like this and tell you guys that I appreciate you so much, and I so appreciate that you tune into my channel and subscribe, would that make me sound better? Probably not. Anyway, neither here nor there, just checking. Comment down below what you think, what's your theories on why this happened, and tell me what you think about my hair. And if you have any pointers, feel free to let me know. I am gonna spray a little spray on my hair because it smells so good. This stuff smells so good. The So Sexy. If you're interested, like I said, I'll link it below. But if you will, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I appreciate your subscribes, and I will see you guys actually, hopefully sooner than later, because I'm hoping to pump more content out here real soon. But the research thing kind of gets me. Anyway, I will see you guys later. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and that your Friday, Saturday, Sunday are awesome, and other days of the week too. Any day that ends in Y, okay? Okay.